what on our website we have. If you go to the website, you'll see a section on the video and audio library, and there's past recordings from other presentations, and this one will be on there eventually too. So we're in the process of doing that. So that's why I'm standing here versus there. Anyway, I just want to welcome everybody and thanks for coming out. And I know that you could be out, out on the lake somewhere fishing, and stuff, and that you would take your time instead to come here is fantastic. And we used to have this as a winter meeting, but we decided spring was a lot more fun. And of course, spring in Ely is, like this, so it's pretty good. But, the next question is, when will the ice go? And so, who thinks the ice will go by Oatner? Good to see. All right. Who doesn't think it'll be out by Oatner? Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Who has been on the ice lately somewhere? Anybody? Oh, 2 weeks ago? Yeah, 2 weeks ago, yeah.
It's all open from the Garden Lake Point back to Madero's farm.
Oh, okay, you've got loons and
loons, swans.
Yeah, where I'm at on White Iron, there's 2 points and there's quite a bit of current from the Pushway coming through. It's open, and last night I was pleased to see a half dozen loons, so they're coming. Yeah, you would have heard of them there. Yep. And I saw on Field Naturalist there were 32 loons a couple days ago at Birch Lake Dam, that area. So they're staging, they're in the area. Today, what we're going to do is I'll go through a couple things and then I'll turn it over to our speaker, which we're really fortunate to have. But first, what I'd like to do is we've got a couple guests here that are very significant partners for WICOLA because of our programs that we work with, which I'll get into. But John Utek, John, you want to raise your hand, is with St. Louis, North St. Louis Soil and Water Conservation District, or SWCD. And we work with John awful lot, and he supports so much of our programs. And his counterpart with Lake County is Liz Anderson, and she also does a ton. Both of them do a lot with the AIS programs, the aquatic invasive species programs. John's the one that coordinates the boat landing inspectors. So if you see inspectors at your favorite boat ramp, they probably know John. And yeah, I hope so. Otherwise, they're fake. We've heard of cases of this where we get these fake inspectors that show up, because they're bored, don't have anything to do, that type of thing. So you can always check to see if they know John, and then you can tell if they're real or not. So that's a good way. And Liz not only also helps us on countless AIS programs, but also with our water monitoring program, which is very dear to us and a huge program for WICOLA. And so we appreciate both of them being here and all the help they give us throughout the year. With that also, we're really lucky to be here at this fine place, and it's been undergoing a lot of changes. I'd like to have Andy come and tell you a little bit about what's been going on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Andy Birkenpass. I'm the general manager for Veterans on the Lake Resort here on beautiful Fall Lake. Always do public speaking. I think I'm pretty good at it, but with that said, how many veterans do we have in the room today? Would the rest of you join me in congratulating these here? Veterans on the Lake has a deep, rich history in Ely, Minnesota and Lake County. We're celebrating our 40th year of business this year. We actually started in 1981 with partnership with the United States Forest Service. Learning lingo, sauna, Santa, sauna, forestry, okay. Started in 1981. Board formed in 1982. We saw our first guests in 1983. So we're celebrating our 40th year of business serving veterans. Our mission statement here at Veterans on the Lake is first and foremost, we are here dedicated to our disabled American veterans and their families, current and retired military and their families, disabled public and their families, and then we allow the general public to come in as well. By doing that, it allows us to do capital projects, such as, if some of you have been here before, you see new paving now. I encourage you while you're here today to drive around the resort, check it out. We've got 2 brand new cabins, cabin 18 and 20. They're both unlocked. Please go see them. Full wheelchair accessible. That's kind of my mission as the GM at Veterans on the Lake. Everything that I touch will be ADA accessible on my watch. That way all of us can use it. Mm-hmm. So some other exciting projects we have going on is some seawall improvements down here and a new wheelchair accessible fishing pier we're putting in. Working directly with the Forest Service, the Lake County DNR, and getting some funds from my RRRD for those endeavors. I wrote a bunch of stuff down. Some big events we have coming this year. July 15th, the Spiritwood Music Festival is going to be up here. It's a benefit for Veterans on the Lake. They're Pat and Donna Surface. I don't know how many are familiar with them. They used to play at the Front Porch Coffee quite a bit, would sell out. We're actually going to have a big top tent on the grounds for 250 people to sit. It's not a private event. It's a public event. They're selling tickets. If you're interested, come. We'll have some local talent there as well. Yes, sir.
Geographically, where are the veterans coming from typically?
All over the United States of America. My history with this facility goes back 24 years. I came out of the Iowa City VA healthcare system as a volunteer. Largest group that this facility would see the entire year. We rent the entire facility for a week at zero cost to the vets. I fundraised all that money the last 20 years of doing that trip, between $60,000 and $70,000. We did have a reservation fee of $50 per guest on the trip. And it was a privilege at the end of the trip to give that $50 back to those people. As we know, if you're disabled, sometimes you have income challenges as well. So it's a pretty cool deal. And they're still coming to date. September 9th, during the Harvest Moon Festival, is actually when we're going to have our kickoff party for celebrating our 40 years up here. I will have on September 9th, the Minnesota National Guard rock and country bands up here performing live, no cost to anybody. Come enjoy the show, come commingle with our guests and see our facility. We're really trying to turn some heads the last few years. I think Aaron will attest to that. He's kind of my boss, so in a roundabout way. One last note is breakfast buffet, May 13th from 5:30 to 11. Walleye opener, of course. For those of you that said the ice wouldn't be off, I have a rake that I need you to use here after a little bit. $15 all you can eat buffet, and proceeds, of course, go to Veterans on the Lake to help us with the capital projects. I can promise you, as an Iowa farm boy, it'll be a damn good meal. Any questions you guys have for me? Yes, sir.
That big walleye, veteran, or is that not?
So that was before my time. It says it was caught on Fall Lake. I don't know the history of it. That's been here for 20 plus years. However, ice fishing this winter, right off of our ice road, we caught a 31-incher. So about a 12.5-pound fish. There are big walleyes in Fall Lake. My friends at the fisheries department did their annual net survey. And it's once every 10 years they come to the smaller lakes. Not only did they say our population rivals Lake Vermilion, but we have some monster fish in this lake. Big walleyes. Just gotta know how to catch them. With that, I'll turn it over to Aaron or whoever else.
Couple things real quick, and then we'll get on to the main act here. Just wanted to touch on some of our programs real quick while I've got you here. You can read about them in the newsletter when it comes out next month. But our AIS this year, we've got a couple things coming up. June 10th, right here is the Kids Fishing Derby. You may have seen there's some articles in the paper in the last week or so on it. We did this last year where we partnered with Lake County and with Liz, and we set up a booth here, and the Kids Derby brings kids here and teaches them how to fish. And part of that is we're teaching them about basic species so that they're knowledgeable fisher folk when they go out and become adults and the like. So that's coming up on the 10th. And also on the 10th, busy day, is Walleye Whamma down in Babbitt. And we're also going to have a AIS booth down there to help with AIS knowledge for the fishermen for that tournament. So that's going to be going on. WICOLA is going to be having a booth again at Blueberry, and Blueberry is July 28th, the 30th, and then Harvest Moon, which is September 8th to the 10th. So stop by, or even more if you'd like to get involved. We're going to be looking for people to help man the booth, which is a lot of fun. You can come for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, I think, and talk with people, hand out literature on AIS, that type of thing. Up here by the coffee, we've got all kinds of literature up there. A lot of it's AIS. There's also some shoreline management information, other things like that for best practices. Help yourself. There's white WICOLA bags, cloth bags. If you don't have one, those are for the members. Please take one. That's why they're here. If you need a new one because it's worn out or you just need another one, help yourself. And there's also these yellow square towels that are what's we call them Swedish dish towels, I guess. Is that what you would still call them? They're a little cleaning tool that is really good for spiny water flea cleaning. So if your fishing line gets coated with spiny, you can use that to wipe down the line, your equipment. You could also use it on a canoe when you're going into BWCA, things like that. So if you don't have one of those, we couldn't get them last year. We had them 2 years ago. We've got more this year. Help yourself to one of those, and it's a good thing to have. So I wanted to make sure you had that. One other important date, make note, we'll remind you, but make note, is on August 3rd. That's a Thursday. That's the annual meeting. And this year we're going to do something different. We're going to meet at the Kawishiwi Lodge down at the Kawishiwi River off down by Spruce Road. And we're going to have an afternoon picnic type event. And we don't have a speaker lined up yet, but we're looking to have a speaker and a picnic. WICOLA will bring probably a main dish and then ask the people potluck other items. We did that in Whiteside a couple years ago, and it was a lot of fun. So August 3rd on that one. So keep that in mind. We've got a number of our board members here. Can you guys raise your hands? So these folks are the people that make WICOLA work. So give them up. They do such a good job that I keep threatening to tell Bill, our treasurer, that he needs to double their pay next year.
Finally.
Yeah. Just to keep up with inflation, we figured it would be good. So, but yeah, they're the people that is what makes everything happen at WICOLA. There's a lot of things going on. 1 or 2 people could not do it, and it's all these people chipping in, and many that aren't here today as well. And if you think that sounds like a lot of fun, you notice how much they're smiling. We're always looking for more volunteers. So if you'd like to get involved, let us know. Just ask one of us. We'd love to have you. Some of us have been here for quite a while. There's going to be turnover. We always need new people. It doesn't matter what your background experience is. We can find something that's a lot of fun to do. I guarantee you that. So just let us know. We'd be happy to have you. Let's see. Trying to think if there's anything else on announcements. As soon as I say there isn't, I'll think of it, but that's all right. Getting on to the most important part, why you're here, other than to socialize and have fun. We're really lucky to have a top-notch speaker here today. Aaron, and his last name is Kania. And I had to ask him that because I didn't know how to pronounce it for sure. But anyway, Aaron is the district ranger for the Kawishiwi District. He came in 2020 and about mid-year, I think it was, something like that. And his background, career-wise, he's had a number of wilderness positions within federal and beyond federal also, mostly federal, I think, Bureau of Land Management, National Forest Service, et cetera. And his background is really neat because he grew up in rural New England and got used to being out in the outdoors, the wilderness, but he was no stranger to the BWCA because his family would still come here, and he did trips long ago. So I think probably when you had the chance to come here, it was like really cool. So with that, Aaron, it's all yours.
Wow. That's quite the buildup. Sets a high bar, Jeff. So, yeah, I do have to say, so I did, when I graduated college, I started in law enforcement with the Bureau of Land Management out west, so Utah, Wyoming, and I hit my 20-year mark in law enforcement, which means I'm eligible for early retirement. Clearly, I didn't get the memo, but 2 days after I hit that 20-year mark, this job opened up, and it always been like really a lark, like, oh, what if, just dreaming, because we did, especially when we were in Wyoming, it got hot and dry, and we just needed to get out of it. And so we always came to the Boundary Waters, and my first trip was up the Kawishiwi to Gabbro and Bald Eagle, and I just remember that and how nice it was to get out of the heat and how lovely the Boundary Waters is. And so literally I hit that 20-year mark and just daydreaming. I saw this job come open, and I was like, what if? And sure enough, they called, and I was like, are you sure? Like, did you actually look at my resume? Like, so, but it was kind of fun. I was working in Southern Utah at the time, and there was a lot of comparisons between Southern Utah, ironically, and Ely, with mining history and kind of conservation with the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument coming in and being controversial. So we had a great conversation for the interview here, and I really enjoyed talking to the forest supervisor and the other district rangers. I said, that really is a place I'd like to work, and we have family here too, so it worked out on the family side of things and all came together. But enough about me. I super appreciate the invite, Jeff. I've always enjoyed talking to the WICOLA members. It's nice, Ely being a small town. You end up in the steakhouse in town and get to talking to people and like, where do you live? And I live by the falls, and I live here, I live there, and you get to talking and telling stories. The Tuesday group, the Ely Field Naturalists. Ely is just such an interconnected town, and so much going on. And what I really appreciate, I have to say, as a district ranger, with these lake associations, is that it's just a great opportunity to talk to a lot of people at once. And so between the WICOLA Association, Burnside, and Lake Vermilion, and I have to confess, I'm a member of the Lake Vermilion Lake Association. We live out there. In 2020, it was really difficult. People love the White Iron chain of lakes, and it was really hard to find an empty house that was for sale. And so we ended up on Lake Vermilion, but I can really appreciate the joy of living on a lake and all that comes with it. It's really a unique experience, and we figured if we're going to live in Minnesota, we're going all in. So we're going to live on a lake. But these lake associations are just so valuable for the work that you do, the volunteerism that happens, the amount of work is phenomenal. And then a year like 2021 with all the fires, it was really nice because it was kind of like a one point of contact too, like, with the boards and with the chairs, is that you can kind of send an email, like one email, like, hey, something's happening. We had a couple fires over by Lake Vermilion that were really threatening on the north side of Lake Vermilion, and it was really easy to talk to the chair over there, Pat, and just say, hey, Pat, like, we got a fire just north of the lake, and it's threatening, cabin owners and properties and resorts, and like, can we work with your members and get the word out and just be really specific about what's happening, and making sure that that all those members are getting the feedback they need. So it was really a easy one stop, just one phone call, and then you reach out to a whole lot of people that way. So, I really appreciate this invite to kind of get to know you better in one place. And Jeff said I have about 90 minutes. He said, but I can't go over 2 hours. That was his rule. If I go over 2 hours, I'm never going to get invited back. So I prepared a whole thesis to present to you all today. So that's a joke. It's a joke. Sorry, dry sense of humor. There's a couple people weren't laughing. So no, just kind of the high points and you know, the prep work here, like who has presented to you in the past was very important. So I don't cover ground that's already been gone over. It's great to have the soil water conservation folks here. We do a lot of work together. I know that they've presented a lot and they're doing just a ton of great work. And then Gloria Erickson has been here as well, talking about some of the Firewise, the stuff right immediately adjacent to your houses. Figured I'd start off a little bit there too. You know, one of the biggest questions, and I had that question too when I first got here, is the Kawishiwi District Ranger. And so almost all the time, not only do they trip up on my name, Kania, which is ironic in a land of Finns and Norwegians, that Kania is a difficult one, but Kawishiwi. So a lot of people are like, what's Kawishiwi? So very early here, I was like, I better figure this one out. And so I did ask some Ojibwe elders about, okay, so I've heard it said several ways, Kawishiwi or Kawishiwe? Like, how do you say it? And they said, Kawishiwi is the way to say it. I'm like, oh, great. And then I said, what does it mean? And they said, it's the river of many beavers. And they described to me how the Ojibwe language is a really descriptive language. And you can see how that would be beneficial as you're traveling through, like, oh, basically take a left at the river of many beavers and then take a right at the green rock, you know, kind of like the way we describe when we're given directions and we don't have Google Maps or anything. So it was super helpful. And then the Ojibwe sense of humor, he said, but that's just the way I say it. So you might have to ask anybody else how they say it. Because I was like, okay, duly noted. So on that, it is really important to me as the district ranger with the Ojibwe people. That was a real learning curve when I arrived here too. Coming up from out west, a lot of Indian reservations, but those Indian reservations are called jurisdictional reservations. So there's a line on the map, and then everything inside that reservation is the reservation. Everything outside the reservation is BLM or Forest Service or private land or whatever. Here, I look at the map, Lake Vermilion, okay, the reservation. Okay, I know where the reservation is. And they said, no, it's different out here. And I said, oh, explain to me. And so the whole notion of reserved treaty rights, that this is the 1854 treaty area, and that, yeah, the reservation is that jurisdictional land, but the treaty rights, the area where those right to hunt, fish, and gather is practiced is much larger, which includes the entirety of the Kawishiwi District, the majority of the Superior National Forest. And so there was a real learning curve and a lot of work to understand that and what that means. And what that means for me as a decision maker when I'm making decisions to any number of things, driveways, authorizing driveways, or power lines, or prescribed burns, like, you know, to have that conversation with the tribes and see what it means. And we didn't have a real good way to do that. You know, as the new guy, I was like, great, so this is a big thing, this is important, like, how do you do that? Well, we don't really have anything to give you, like, here's the how to have tribal consultation. And so we embarked on a journey of creating a memorandum of understanding with the Ojibwe here, the three bands and the 1854 authority, to put on paper what it means, what that tribal consultation looks like, how we're gonna relate to each other and practice that relationship and honor the obligation to ensure those resources are out there. And so good news, and as we're talking about these big events that are happening is next Tuesday, we're actually gonna all get together and sign that MOU up in Grand Portage. So our regional forester is gonna come out, and then the chairs of the three bands are gonna be there, and we're gonna sign it. So it's a pretty big step in the right direction. So.
Where are the three bands, or what are the three bands?
So Boys Fort is probably the one that's,
Okay, that's okay area, or does that come up?
well, Boys Fort, Vermilion,
Oh,
and then Cloquet is the Fond du Lac.
Oh.
And then Grand Portage is up in Grand Portage. So, and then there's the 1854 Authority, which Boys Fort and Grand Portage are part of. And then there's Glythwick, which is the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, which Fond du Lac is part of. So there's a whole bunch of people that come together to have those conversations.
Did you say this memorandum of understanding is gonna be signed next week?
Yeah. Yep, on
Is there gonna be
Tuesday.
a little ceremony or
There will be, yeah, there'll be a whole lot of information coming out with that
where's that gonna be then?
up in Grand Portage.
Okay,
Yeah, for some reason, almost all the conversations have happened up in Grand Portage, so I've got a lot of time on the highway getting back and forth, but it's been good getting to know that part of the forest too. So, yeah, I think that's really something to be proud about. You know, I've been here 3 years now, and to see what it was like when I first got here, and you know, not a good understanding of how that all happens to now a really solid relationship and interaction that's kind of backed up by a little bit of process, because us Europeans like process. Bureaucracy, some of you might call it, or red tape when it gets really bad. So,
Do you know where there is a map that shows the treaty lands?
yeah, if you just Google 1854 treaty, you'll see a map. It's about 6 million acres. They started posting it on the highways, and so now on I-35 there's a sign, and then some you get out further west there's some signs, but we're in the middle of it here. So when it started, it was 6 million acres, right? In 1854, it was all the United States federal land. But then since 1854, like homesteading, mining, railroads, all sorts of things reduced the size of that federal estate to now it's about 3 million acres of federal. And this is a real learning point. So the treaty is only between the federal government and the bands. It's not with the state of Minnesota, St. Louis County, or you as private landowners. And so when the bands are counting acres of what's left of that original area, they're counting federal acres. That was a real learning point.
I knew there was something else I wanted to mention, and so you've done a great job of this. Is one of the projects that's coming out is, you may have seen where the folk school worked with the band to get the Ojibwe name map out, and it's for the Lake Vermilion area. Paul Sharkey, who's on our board, has worked and has gotten the names for the WICOLA chain lakes and some of the other surrounding lakes. And we're looking to put a map out. It'll probably be something in the newsletter next month. And we're looking to maybe get like a placemat size laminated map that either you could put it on the wall or you could use it as a placemat, something like that. But something that we hope to have out this year at some point. So we'll be more on that. So
Cool.
Aaron, talking about the names that brought that home. So thank you.
Yeah, that's a great, they sell it at the folk school if you're interested in it. It's yeah, just that map of Lake Vermilion, but instead of the names we're used to, like Pike Bay, they have the Ojibwe version of that, which is similar to Pike Bay. So it's pretty cool. Christy?
I'm going to try to ask my question in a way that doesn't put you in an uncomfortable position. Since you've been working with tribal leaders and you're going to sign this memorandum of understanding, since being up here for a year and a half, I see a lot of things in print. and also presentations about from members of the various tribes at different things happening in town. And very often those tribal people refer to themselves using the word Indian.
Mhm.
In your dealing with the members of the tribes, does anybody ever cross their eyes and look at you askance if you use the word Indian? It appears in a lot of their structural acronyms that people want to insist on being called Indigenous or Native American, or are they pretty relaxed about it?
No, words have meanings.
Right.
And so I have to say this, so I'll pull it back just a little bit with my kids. My kids are in high school. I went to their high school. They go to school in the cities. And it was what I grew up knowing as Columbus Day. And oh my gosh, the school was plastered of like Columbus is the devil. And like, you know, it's Indigenous Day. And so there's been a real shift in society, right? So, and I would say, you know, our tribal members are no different, right? There's people that are like, well, I grew up calling myself an Indian, I'm an Indian. And then there's other, like maybe a new generation or people that have come to a different understanding and they don't choose to say that. And so the other thing you'll hear is the terms Chippewa, Ojibwe, and Anishinaabe. And so I did a bunch of research and again, talked to elders about what the preference is there. And when I'm in this uniform, probably the most correct thing to say is Chippewa, because that's the language in the treaty. It's the, you know, the US government and the Chippewa. Chippewa and Ojibwe are the same word, just a different spelling and maybe a different way of saying it, but it's the same word. And so generally as a European, Ojibwe is probably the right thing to say. And then Anishinaabe, talking to elders, that is their way of describing themselves, the people, right? And so I guess what I've come to being comfortable with is like when I'm actually like meeting with a band member in my official capacity, I'll say Chippewa. And sometimes they'll look at me and then it's a good reminder to have that conversation that, yeah, this is a government to government conversation. But then other times I'll say Ojibwe and I almost never say Anishinaabe because to me and with my conversations with them, that's reserved for them. And so, but there's a lot of people that say Anishinaabe or Anishinaabe, which is multiple plural. So
To follow up on that, in Canada, First Nations people has become very popular.
yeah,
Has any of that transpired into the US, do you know?
I haven't heard that. I think that's more where we talk about indigenous, you know, which is, I guess, a synonym for the first people. Like they were indigenous, they were the ones that were here first. And then, of course, that history too with the Ojibwe is they weren't really the first people here. And we know that, and they know that, and they'll be happy to tell you that history of, you know, the Lakota were here. And then when the Dutch ended up in New York, the Ojibwe moved out of New York and moved to the Great Lakes region and then pushed the Lakota out into the prairies. So that, yeah, there's this whole who was here first and who was here even before the Lakota. But I would imagine that pretty much when the glaciers receded, there was people coming right behind them. So there've been obviously people here for a long time. But I think that kind of transitions into, you know, the other thing I really want to let you know about what we're working on the forest is our prescribed burning program. And granted, we were having some conversations earlier about the only stuff burning right now is like piles, you know, in your yards, in your neighborhoods. But they say, this is why I raised my hand about ice out, Jeff, is this next week, it looks to get a little bit warmer, a lot drier, and the wind's going to pick up. And we're supposed to get a bunch of wind here this next week, and thinking that's going to cure out our leaves and needles, and we'll probably be ready for prescribed burning, and then probably shortly thereafter wildfire. So before green up, it's looking like this next month is supposed to be pretty dry.
I've been cutting a lot of balsam fir dead ones and burning them. Is that the right thing to do, or do you suggest leaving them away?
Well,
I
yeah,
burn 'em in
that's
winter
a,
time when there's a couple feet of snow.
yeah, that's a very, Rusty could probably tie you in. We put on a burn pile class, because there is a lot of liability, and I don't want to sugarcoat the liability. There's liability, but then there's also landowner choice, right? Like, what is it that you want your forest to look like on your property? And that decision is kind of different for everybody. I would say, me personally, I definitely, this time of year is great, or even during the winter, is I'll cut a whole bunch of balsam, just put it on the ground, because then when the sap rises, the sap's not coming up into that balsam. But dried balsam laying on the ground is a fire hazard. And so if you're able to safely burn it, and go to the DNR website, they have burn permits. And if you go to their website and look at when you need a permit, right now you need a permit, which is not too difficult. But then as it evolves, as it gets dry, it's going to say no burning. And so that's generally for the public a good place to go and just get a feel. The other thing to be really aware of in the spring like this, if you start a pile burning, and even if it goes out and it's done, and then you go to work or go on vacation or whatever, sometimes there's coals in there, or it'll get into the roots, and then it'll turn hot and dry and windy, and then it'll come back to life. And we had one of those out on Birdside. October, it was like almost Halloween, and I got a call like 10 o'clock one night. Hey, we got a big fire out on Burnside. And it was piles that it got hot and dry, and they took off again. So something to be aware of. But I think a lot of what Gloria talks about is reducing that that risk next to your house is a good thing. And I appreciate it when we do have big fires, like those fires up on Vermilion, like knowing which properties had done work beforehand. Gave our firefighters and our structural firefighters, like your local volunteer firefighters, a real fighting chance to protect that property with pumps and hoses and all sorts of stuff.
So about a third of the trees on my place are dead balsam. So I take it down. I could spend a lifetime trying to burn those up.
Yeah,
So if I were to take them down and branch them and cut them up into little sections, let them lie on the ground and become soil, how long does it take for that to degrade to where it's not a, before it becomes soil?
yeah, it's I've been experimenting with the same at our place to a degree, because like if you have standing dead and it's already kind of started rotting and you get bugs and stuff working on it, the biggest thing is getting it directly on the ground, because if it's up in the air at all, and it's hard to do with balsam because those branches are like infinitely designed to keep it from smashing down. But if it's up in the air and it's staying dry, it takes a long time to decompose. The other thing I'll do, like in my place too, is if I have like if I have a greener one, I'll actually burn it for firewood, because if you get a good sized green balsam, I mean, it burns actually better than some of the pines. Obviously we got soot and creosote and whatnot, but some of them I'll just limb them so that they sit on the ground, and it actually makes really good habitat for like salamanders and frogs and bugs and stuff, and those ground birds that like to eat bugs. And so I'm growing in my knowledge, like on my own private land, you know, what the outcome is, and leaving some of that is actually beneficial for the soils and whatnot. So
So get them on the ground.
get it on the ground.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that the SWCDs have staff that can answer those questions. That's kind of what we're there for. So we exist to help private landowners do conservation work on their own land and manage their forests and stuff. So reach out to us.
Yeah, they have phenomenal programs and write forest plans, and there's a lot, like we're doing a lot of interactive work right now. And I'll put a plug in for us on May 10th from 3 to 6 p.m. We have a open house at the ranger station, Kawishiwi Ranger Station, and soil water conservation districts are going to be there, NRCS, DNR, St. Louis County, and NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. They're coming with like a tornado generator or something, and I have no idea what that is, but it sounds like fun. So May 10th, 3 to 6 at the ranger station. Come on by, and then Liz and NRCS, they'll have a lot of information for you. But you know, on that note is all these things that we talk about, whether it's aquatic invasive species, balsam, you know, spruce budworm, wildfire, like none of those things respect or care about property lines. And that's a challenge. Like we talk about that Euro viewpoint of like property ownership and property lines. And it's fun talking to my Ojibwe friends that they don't think that way. They think of the land and the landscape and this ecosystem. And so maybe one of those things is moving back towards like, how do we, you know, live in partnership with each other and, you know, kind of look at the land, like what makes sense on the land. And so you'll start seeing probably more of this as we're planning and designing prescribed burns, is looking at, I've asked my staff, take the land ownership off the map and look at what makes sense on the ground. And so what we're looking at is like, okay, do you burn to a road? Do you burn to a lake? Maybe there's a gravel pit or something that are these big natural features, and then add that ownership back in. Once you figured out what right looks like, then add that ownership back in, and then reach out to those landowners and see what their interest is. See what kind of work they've already done. Maybe they've already done some balsam removal, or they have a sprinkler system or something to that effect. And then then we kind of work back from what right looks like, and then look at like what's possible. Because it's really difficult in that balsam country to kind of work off of a property line, and then to do a prescribed fire, even a wildfire, using a property line. It's much safer to use roads. And so we're working on a couple of prescribed fires this year that, you know, include those concepts. And so the ones that you'll probably see on the Kawishiwi District this year, we have one over on Bear Island, the island on Bear Island. And so this is what we call a re-entry burn. So this will be the second time we're going back in there. We went there in 2016 and did some work. We don't always look to like burn the whole entire thing all at once. Like if we can get 30% and kind of knock down the big stuff, fuels, that dead balsam in there, if we can kind of bring that down like 30% of it, and then we'll come back again and get another 30%, and then, you know, over time with multiple burns, kind of restore it back to that, probably that Anishinaabe way, you know, the Ojibwe, because they were doing a lot of burning, and that's where a lot of these red and white pines came from, and blueberries. Moose habitat was through those what we call high frequency, low intensity burning. So
When you take Highway 1 to the North Shore, you drive through the Greenwood Fire area.
mhm.
And I'm not sure if it's Forest Service or state or county, but there's some humongous brush piles there.
Mhm.
You know, some of them look like they've got some good firewood in there, maybe it's biomass. And how are they gonna dispose of those big brush piles?
We'll be burning them.
They will be burned.
Yeah, there's a lot of, well, in there, yeah, so our plan right now is to burn them. We tried last year, and many of you may have known, we had a burn pause with the Forest Service, so we couldn't burn because we did a major national review of our whole prescribed burn program after prescribed burns in New Mexico escaped. And so we just shut down all of our prescribed burning. We did a massive review of how we do burning. And then it was November by the time we were approved to start burning again, and there was too much snow in those piles. We got a couple of them, but it was too wet to get good consumption, as we say, because we don't want to leave a mess there right off the side of Highway 1. So we want to burn them pretty clean.
So after you do the prescribed burn, and do you do a replant or do you let it come back naturally?
Yeah, it really depends. So our silviculturalists, they write a prescription for that forest, and they're looking at the life of that stand. They're looking at the life of that piece of the forest. And so it varies, and it really depends on kind of what's there. And so a lot of times our prescribed burns, we have different outcomes, different objectives for them. And so sometimes it's to reduce the hazardous fuels, especially if there's houses nearby or lodges and property. Other times it's to replant or to get the forest going again. And so like Bear Island, like we're not going to replant that. We're doing kind of that high frequency, low intensity burning. And then the white pines, red pines will naturally seed in and restore. We did a burn over on the Tomahawk Road a couple years ago. It was an aspen clear cut. And so we burned the slash to kind of set back some of that aspen, return the nutrients to the soil. And then we have a couple years, we actually planted it for pollinator species. And so we burned the slash to kind of reduce that amount of fuel on the ground. And then we wanted to give a couple years for just flowers to grow so bees can come in. And then there's an olive-sided flycatcher that eats the bees. And so like we kind of have like this 5-year window where it'll be really good habitat for bees and flycatchers. And then the aspen's gonna be really healthy in there and set up for a good aspen stand down the road. So Jeff?
Yeah, going back to the question of the Greenwood fire, you can drive down Highway 2 there. There's some very big stretches where very low land, and it looks like most of the trees that were standing there have burned. And then over the winter and everything, a lot of it is just fallen over and raised up huge root things there. Obviously, they had very shallow roots. And it seems like there was a lot of the peat or topsoil or whatever that was burned away. And they're just laying there now. What can be done to that to come back there?
Yeah. Did anybody attend the Pagami Symposium we just did middle of April? So if anybody wasn't there, look it up, or maybe I'll call Jeff and get a link to send out to members. So we did the whole Pagami Symposium. It was a 2-day event with the University of Minnesota, and we had it at Vermilion, and it's all recorded on Zoom, and those recordings are out on the web now. And so we talk about that a lot. And there's a guy, Brian Studervant, that talked about fire intensity and its impact on soils. And he actually said the worst thing as they were doing their research was when they found these low intensity burn areas, because that's where the trees wouldn't burn, but the soil and roots would, and then the trees fall over in the wind. There's not really a market for that wood. And so that was a challenge because there's no market. So there's right now, so like balsam, there's not much of a market. The Verso mill shut down. And then black spruce is kind of that same wood pulp market. There's just no market. And then aspen, if aspen has any char on it, they won't use it for paper. And so that reduces the market for that. So that type of wood, there wasn't much market for. Down the road a little bit, if people know the Jackpot Trailhead, we did do a salvage logging effort to remove some of those trees that were dead but not burned so severely that they couldn't be used. And so we did about 250-acre thinning. And what really blows my mind, especially with the Greenwood fire, so that area had been logged. So right where Highway 1, Highway 2 come together, we did a thinning in that red pine stand. And that thinning finished in June. The fire started in August, so it was thinned. And then the fire burned through. And then the fire turned around and burned through a second time. And then our firefighters went in and they did some ignitions to take it to the edge of the highway so it wouldn't jump Highway 1. And then we did that salvage operation, and we did all that work. So basically things happened there, like 5 different things happened. And University of Minnesota was up here, they're foresters, they were doing a class. And so I took their forester out and kind of did a field trip. And before I told them anything, I said, so what do you think about this piece of forest right here? And he said, there's too many trees. And I'm like, all right, now let me tell you what happened. And I'm like, still, he goes, yeah, it's thick. It's really thick. And I think that was a big point coming out of that Pagami Symposium. If you look historically, if you look 200 years ago with Ojibwe burning practices, indigenous burning, as we say, the forests were much thinner then. There was a lot of fire that they were using to maintain the forest, and they were really healthy forests. And then, of course, logging happened for quite a few years. And then with fire exclusion, putting all fires out, indigenous burning has been removed from the land. And then, our thinning, our forestry practices are probably less than they were in the 70s, it's safe to say. So really changed outcomes big time. So yeah, check out the Pagami Symposium, hours worth of rainy day things to do.
Is spruce budworm done its course, or is it
No.
still?
Yeah, no.
Our property, it hammered, 100 of them, and we cut them down, but there's still probably 25% that are still green and look healthy. Are they gonna make it, or is it a wave of the moth that comes through? And
Yeah, that's I'd be curious, like that's in science, you have a control set up, like, and be curious what the work you're doing, does that then help the trees that are there, make them stronger so that they could fight? So balsam's good for about 40 years, and it has like toxins in it that make it resilient to bugs. And after about 40 years, that goes away. And balsam is really fire intolerant, but balsam also needs fire to clear, to make room for new balsams. And so even though it's fire intolerant, it's got so much seed and everything that it'll grow and do quite well after a fire. And so I think that's a strategy, right? Is when it reaches that level where it's thick, then the balsam, the spruce budworm hits it, fire comes through and kind of resets that stand and resets that process. So yeah, we could probably, I don't know, maybe I wasn't joking when we said 90 minutes. We could probably talk all day here.
the worst area that I had was a real heavy or thick grove of balsam, and that all died.
Yeah.
I mean, it was lower down by the lake, and it was a lot of stuff, 6 inches in diameter.
Yeah, so
Close.
so I'll use my own private example again, because it's different than what we do on the forest. But I use my fist, and if a balsam's bigger than my fist, I leave it, but I'll limit up to about as far as I can reach, about 10 feet or 8 feet or whatever. But I do like to leave balsam because I really notice that when the warblers and stuff are coming through in the spring, boy, they are on those balsams, like almost exclusively in balsam, because it protects them from the weather, and there's all sorts of good seeds and stuff. But I'm watching because I have one right out my picture window on the lake. It's just the most beautiful tree, and I really want it. Like it just frames the whole view, and I'm kind of curious because we did a whole lot of thinning. We probably, like you, took 75% out. But now it makes a good mosaic on our little acreage. And so I'm curious if that's going to help those kind of more mature balsams stay healthy, because there's less competition, there's less attraction. So kind of running my own experiment on my little acres. So I'm sure there's a ton of research that Liz and others can direct you to, though.
Are you limbing your balsam up for fire protection, or is that for the healthier tree?
Fire protection. I have to say I'm neurotic about fire protection, and I'll confess to y'all, part of my career leading up to here is working on incident management teams all over the country. And I remember my very first fire was 1997, and I worked for the Park Service at the time at Bryce Canyon. And I got called out with our engine to this little fire. It was maybe, I don't even think it was 200 acres. But oh my God, every firefighter there was like, this is a big deal. Like, this is a big fire. Put everything at it, suppressed it. And so what was that, 26 years ago? Now I've been on fires. I remember my first fire that was over 100,000 acres. Most expensive fire in Utah history. Very next year, I went on a fire, 150,000 acres. Most expensive fire in Utah history. A month later, another fire, almost 200,000 acres in Utah. Most expensive fire in Utah history. So in 14 months, 3 fires were the most expensive fire in Utah history. And then I've been on fires in, let's say the Bryan Head fire in southern Utah burned up more than half of the Ranger district. The fire, the Bald Mountain fire in northern Utah, outside of Provo, burned up more than half the Ranger district. I was on a fire 2020, the Sierra National Forest, the Creek Fire. There's actually a really cool PBS documentary on it now. That was like 350,000 acres, burned up more than half of 2 Ranger districts. That same year, there was the August Complex fire in Northern California, over 1 million acres. Burned up the whole forest, like literally the entire national forest. It was on the Swan Lake fire up in Alaska on the Kenai Peninsula. It was on a national wild refuge. It's a moose. It was set aside specifically for moose. Burned up almost the entire refuge. In all of those fires, houses were lost, properties were lost. Unfortunate, there was no fatalities on any of those fires. But seeing that firsthand, seeing the impact on a community, and then taking a job as a district ranger and looking at our forest here, it makes me neurotic. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I spend a lot of time thinking about fire, talking about fire, interacting about fire. I am going to transition though, because we got a lot of cool stuff that we can talk about that's not fire. But I am neurotic, and I have to say, I don't want that to be my district. Haven't seen that. 2021 was my second summer, but coming from that incident management perspective, that's what I did my whole first year during COVID, was meeting with emergency managers, meeting with the sheriffs, meeting with Ely City, where's the evacuation plan? What's it look like? Talking to my firefighters, do you know Ely's evacuation plan? Let's make sure we're on the same page. Social media, coming from law enforcement, lessons learned in the law enforcement community, getting the word out through social media, hey, something bad happened, let's talk about it. Let's get it out there. Let's have press conferences. Let's do community meetings. And so that's where you saw in 2021, okay, we got to get our social media working right. We got to make sure we're putting messages out. We're doing community meetings. The cooperators in town that have businesses, bringing them together, okay, how's this going to impact your customers, the closures, all of that stuff. And I think I was really insistent on that based on my experience over the last 20 plus years. So.
I have a comment and then a question. To answer your question, I've done a lot of reading lately about the spudworm. What I read was that the spruce budworm will stay around until they pretty much run out of their food source. Then once they've pretty much eaten them out, they'll, whatever little critters are left, they'll migrate to an adjacent area. So they'll pretty much decimate an area, there, you know, there might be some that for whatever reason might get missed, but they'll pretty much get, you know, eat it down till there's not much left, and that could be several years before that happens. So what, you know, what remains after 1 or 2 years, there's gonna be loss, even more loss in the next couple of years. So that's that. But I had to just quit, when you're talking about your fish, you said you cut balsam that's smaller than that size or bigger than that size?
Smaller.
Smaller.
Yeah, so if it's bigger than my fist, I leave it.
Oh, okay.
If it's smaller than my fist, I remove it. But the ones that are bigger than my fist, I limb them up. But that's just me and my property, like find what works for you on your properties. And we do have conversations too. I know it's a real visual, like the roads and driveways and neighbors and stuff. And so it's a real personal thing for each property, you know, and I have a lot of conversations with my neighbors. I was telling a story. My other neighbor only comes up Memorial Day to Labor Day pretty much. And so I've talked to him and like, hey, if you don't mind during the winter, is it okay if I do some work on your property? Cause like it bothers me. And he's like, I don't care what you do. And so we're pretty good that way. And so I end up spending a lot of my winter on his place cleaning it up and just cause I can't sleep at night. So, all right, we'll move on from fire because I think we could talk hours about it in days and lifetimes. But so the other thing that's important, I guess this is the transition to the other thing that should really be on your radar is owners in the WICOLA area. So how many people know what the high-low EIS project was? Oh, really? Okay, I know we use a lot of governmentese and acronyms, but I thought you'd all know. So up off the Echo Trail, the North Arm of Burnside Lake, 2019, my predecessor, Gus Smith, one of your former members, worked on a project up there, what we call fuel reduction, but forest management, you know, so logging, prescribed burning, there was some recreation involvement up there, looking at the landscape as well, like looking at features within the wilderness, and then using those to design prescribed burns. And so that happened in 2019. On my watch here, looking at the Fernberg area is the next place to do a large environmental analysis for that area. And like what you're talking about with the budworm, the former environmental analysis we did there is rather old. It's more than 20 years old. It was called the glacier analysis. And pretty much all the work that was approved in that got done, more or less. And then it's time to start looking at it again. And so this is where we'll be talking about concepts like prescribed fire, any sort of timber harvest, and then a big part of it will be recreation as well, some trails. Because it's in your neighborhoods, it's in your backyards, in most places, it's really important for all of you to be aware of it and then to kind of understand what we're doing. So probably the big date for that to have on your calendar is this fall is what we're aiming for. And so what my whole staff is working on right now is what we call the data collection, is what's the existing condition out there? Like where is the budworm? What's the extent of the budworm? What timber stands are of the right age to harvest? You know, where are the fuels like extraordinary and hazardous that need to be reduced? And so my staff is out there collecting all that data to put together into a package. And then we have what's called a scoping meeting. And that scoping meeting is what we're looking for is this fall. So to bring everybody in, look at the maps, and that's where we talk about the purpose and the need for doing this analysis. And then we start talking about the outcomes. So what are you thinking in your neighborhood? You know, where is your property located? Like say there's a, you know, timber sale that's nearby. Well, that's where we have the conversation. What's your thoughts on that? You know, what ideas do you have? Some timber sales up in the high-low through NRCS and Soil Water Conservation District, they they write their stewardship plan. It's adjacent to a Forest Service timber sale. And they're like, just let us know when they're in there logging, and we'll call the logger and see if we got some of our own acres that they can log. So all sorts of different outcomes that happen during that analysis.
When you talk about recreation and trails, what kinds of trails are you talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, again, data collection. So I think of kind of two things with that. What's proposed? What is it that people want? And probably the big one in the proposed is the North Country Trail. And so are people familiar with the North Country Trail? Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. So the North Country Trail, how about the Appalachian Trail? People familiar with the Appalachian Trail? Okay, the Pacific Crest Trail. So these really long national scenic trails like the Appalachian Trail. Well, there's one that actually comes through here, and it goes from the Appalachian Trail, and then it connects over into North Dakota. And it's like a 4,600-mile long trail. And it goes like through New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. And when it hits Minnesota, it goes up the Lake Superior hiking trail, cuts across the border trail, comes down the Kekakavik Trail. And then right now, there's nothing. There's no connector from Snowbank Lake to basically the Chippewa National Forest. And so the idea is that they get to Ely, and then in Ely, they get on the Mesabi Trail. Well, there is a proposal from the North Country Trail Association to connect Snowbank Lake to Ely with a foot hiking trail.
So we're talking hiking, we're not talking ATV or snowmobile.
That's hiking, yep, just hiking only. And the North Country Trail specifically wants to be non-motorized year-round. Not to say that in places they might combine with a motorized trail, like particularly if you get out west of here, some of the wetlands where there's like a snowmobile bridge, they might go on the snowmobile trail for a while and go through the wetlands and the bridge. And but so that section is just proposed for hiking as part of the North Country Trail. The other part, and I think this is what's the existing condition, what's out there that's existing. And so there's trails that we have designated through a motor vehicle use map of what's allowed, what's existing. But then there's also some that we know about that just kind of got built or used, or it might have been an old logging road that somebody removed the boulders and barricade and started using. So there's some that are authorized and some that are not authorized. And so it's a matter of gathering that information, putting it all on a map, and then like, again, having that public meeting of, well, what is the outcome that people are looking for? On that note, though, there is the state of Minnesota has a similar environmental analysis process called the environmental analysis worksheet, which I'm not as familiar with, but there is a proposal out now that they posted for some ATV trails. Trying to think what would be like kind of in the footprint of WICOLA, but part of it's on the Cloquet line across the Range River. Then Twin Lakes out by the Docks on Wheels. There's a piece over there, and then out by Tower and down by Hoyt Lakes, there's a couple segments that they're looking at. So if people are interested, that's a state process, and at some point the Forest Service will look at it as well. So
You mentioned doing some work up the Echo Trail. Usually Pat and I run the Echo Trail about this time of the year, a couple of weeks later when it dries up. A couple of years ago, there's a lot of logging, and it looks like they're trying to widen the right of way, and they're whacking down some pretty good sized pine. Surely there must have been a little controversy about that at the time.
there's a little. So when you say you run it, are you like
Oh, no.
doing your
Not
Echo
even
Trail
close.
marathon?
That's a bigger feat. We don't run any place. Well, the one that we've downsized now, but I used to run a 30-foot motorhome, and I
Oh,
saw some of
okay.
the loggers were complaining about the right of way. It wasn't wide enough for a logging truck, and I thought, if I can run a 30-foot motorhome down the Echo Trail, they could manage to get a logging truck through there.
Yeah,
And so I'm wondering why they're trying to push back that right of way, cutting down some very nice pine trees.
yeah. So the Forest Service piece of that, so there's a lot of landowners up there. There's Forest Service, state, county. And so it's the county that's doing a lot of that work up there. And we spent a lot of time with the county, with the county commissioner and the highway department with St. Louis County, specific on the Forest Service piece, because there's a lot of things that we need to consider and think about. And so some of it's roadless because it's adjacent to the wilderness and was considered or could be considered maybe as an addition to the wilderness at some point in the future. And that's in our forest plan. There's other places that that have goshawks. And so we need to be real thoughtful and considerate where the goshawks are. And in that high-low project, it actually said we're not going to cut timber near the goshawks as long as those nests are occupied. And so we talked to the county about that. And then the aesthetics of it. And so on the Forest Service land, we actually went out there with anybody know John Pierce? He's our rec planner. Does a lot of the recreation trails and boats and stuff. So he actually went out there with the county crew and they flagged all of the trees that like this tree needs to stay. And so in our fire program, you talked about the Greenwood fire, what that forest looks like. We call that a shaded fuel break. And actually leaving trees makes for a lower fire hazard because shade is cooler and wetter. And so we kind of wanted to do something similar off the Echo Trail of let's consider the aesthetics, let's consider the wildlife, let's consider the wilderness piece, and then the fire hazard. So we worked really closely on those Forest Service parcels to maintain those pine stands. They're doing a lot of other work though, like culverts and putting a lift of gravel on it. So the county definitely has a responsibility to maintain that road to standards, but we don't want to go overboard with that, you know, that we do have a plan, a forest plan that we're sticking to. So a lot of time, a little bit of controversy, definitely a lot of time. I think that time though prevented it from being a big controversy because I don't know, are there any road engineers in here? Road engineers they want straight, flat, wide. And we have a lot of people that want to come up here and go canoeing for a week and they don't want straight, flat, wide. So.
Do you get to work with the wolves at all?
Wolves?
Yeah, are there a lot of packs?
Less than we did. When I got here, they were in that long-term wolf study, Dave Meach. And so we were flying the beaver like all the time and collars and stuff on wolves and they were flying it all the time. But that study ran out and finished. And this is the first winter that we're not doing that work. So yeah, less than we did before, but generally no, when it comes to wildlife, that's either the state or like say with wolves, the Fish and Wildlife Service. So, but yeah, I think he covered a lot with so we're calling it the Fernberg project. And it goes the Tomahawk Road. It's all in Lake County. So the Tomahawk Road to Highway 1, and then it does come up River Point and goes up the county line, and then it goes up into the wilderness like Basswood, and then it comes back and makes a big swoop around the Fernberg, and then connects down by the Spruce Road back to the Tomahawk Road. So it's a pretty big project area that we're looking at. But it's like, the fire hazard is the big thing in there. And how do you do that? How do you reduce the fire hazard with just looking at lands outside of wilderness? It's really hard to do. Again, fire doesn't respect property lines or designations. So, so it'll be fun, September-ish. We'll probably join up again and do some talking about all of that. So. All right.
Where could we look to get more updates on that?
We'll be doing a ton of press releases and our website, and there'll be a whole push. There'll be a public comment period, probably 30, 45 days of public comment, and we'll be definitely open houses at the ranger station.
So to search on the web, when would we search
Well,
on?
there's nothing now. There's nothing out there now, but this fall,
But the name we would search.
Fernberg, the Fernberg. Yeah, pretty, I don't know, maybe we can do a poll and find a better name for it. Like the Fernahawk. I try not to be too humorous with my staff, you know, because it's like, let's not get too creative. Some of those timber sales, they get kind of creative in the names. It's like, where did you come up with that one? So, all right. So, let's see, we talked fire, we talked NEPA, we talked trails. Go ahead, Jeff.
Do you have anything that you can share on, the proposal to put some bike trails over on the,
Deer Ridge area?
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you, that probably, because that's relatively here.
Yep, that'll probably be separate from the Fernberg project. So there is a group of folks in Ely that are really looking at the mountain bike trail networks. Hidden Valley, anybody ride or hike or ski out Hidden Valley area? Yeah, so I'd say coming from southern Utah, mountain biking, those trails, those mountain bike trails are like the highest quality. Those things are phenomenal trails. And it seems like every time I'm riding out there, I bump into somebody from Minneapolis or wherever, and they're like, what brings you to Ely? This trail. I'm like, wow, okay. So the kind of the group of folks in town that are looking at that, there's a unwritten rule in the mountain bike world that 25 plus miles of trail equals a trail system that people will come visit for. And Hidden Valley is about 10 miles-ish. And so they're looking at other trails that are available. So one of them I'm super excited about is Vermilion campus and where the ranger station is. Forest Service has like 20 acres or so there, and then the college has some acres, and City of Ely has some acres, and connect that whole like a trail network. There's already a bunch of trails back in there that the college kids kind of use, but you know, develop that into a mountain bike network. It's close enough to Hidden Valley that they connect. And then another one is over on the other side of Ely, the west side of Ely. There's some lands by that new trailhead building that's going to go up. So some trails over there. And then the one that's probably most important to y'all is Deer Ridge. And so Deer Ridge right now, we did all that mastication work in there. We knocked down all the understory and put it on the ground so it can start decomposing. We are looking to do a prescribed burn in there probably next year. We have some piles in there that we're trying to burn, but then probably after that work is done, it'll be easier to walk around in there and get around. And even though there's a tentative map out there that I've seen, it hasn't been analyzed yet. It hasn't been through that public process. So, so I guess the best way to phrase that is it's out there in the ether, but it's not approved at this point. So keep an eye out for that one as well.
Where is Deer Ridge?
Oh, so just south of town here, Mushroom Island. Familiar with Mushroom Island off of White Iron?
Start with south, Old Airport Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you know
The
where
gravel
Old
pit.
Airport Road is, and you go south from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody knew my predecessor, Gus Smith, it's right by where his house was. So
Yeah.
that's how I know it's by Gus's house. So good question. So yeah, I think those are kind of the big things on my mind. I'm glad you brought that up because that was something I was going to get into. You know, I guess always the boundary waters, towboats. You probably heard we were litigated in February regarding towboats. So White Iron, obviously Fall Lake, there's some impacts there potentially. Just a smidge on Farm Lake, a couple of towboats being operated there. Mostly Moose Lake though is where the biggest impacts would be. And so the allegation in the litigation is that the Forest Service has allowed too many commercial towboats to haul canoes up into the wilderness. Those are motor lakes, but in the 1978 law, it was written in there that there's a certain limit to what those boats are, and then how they calculated that limit kind of left a lot of vagueness to it. And then so that was prime fodder for attorneys to become heavily involved. And so that litigation happened. There was an injunction filed, and we're waiting for the judge to decide on the injunction. And so so it's Wilderness Watch that filed the litigation and the injunction. If they succeed, then what they're asking for in that injunction is no commercial towboats starting this year until we can go through a bigger process to do an assessment. And so if the judge finds in their favor, that would be a pretty severe outcome and a major change. So now that's commercial towboats, which is a subset of like motorboat use, because there's exempt motorboat use, which many of you on these lakes are familiar with. And then there's permitted either day use or overnight motor. And so we're really talking about a piece of the whole motor use. So it can be kind of complicated some days.
Aaron, do you know in the body waters, some of the camping sites become very, very well used and you might say overused? Are any new sites created anymore?
Very rarely. It is possible, but it's very rare. And I know on the North Kawishiwi, there's been some requests, you know, when you come off of Farm Lake and then you have a ways to go, like there's those first set of camps and then it's a ways up there to the next set. So there has been some requests. We've gone out there and looked several times at what might be a good site, but we haven't really found anything that's perfectly suitable. And then it would go through environmental assessment as well to determine. So there was some over on the east side of the forest that were approved, but it's very rare. So I think what our preference generally is that if there's a campsite that's impacted, to mitigate that, so do erosion control. You may have seen some that put boulders and gravel on to kind of firm them up, shore them up so that they're not eroding and kind of bring them back to a smaller size. So, but yeah, it's a challenge. Real different change in use patterns, you know, is what we're talking about a lot is base camping. So, and I gently rib like Steve Paragas, like, hey, so all this stuff you're selling, you know, it makes it hard to go on a really long trip. You know, some of that stuff looks heavy. And so, I mean, we all know that, you know, getting older, getting more equipment, or I'm traveling with my 7-year-old nephew in May, and I'm planning on camping at the same place a couple nights. So it has its place for sure, but kind of a little bit of a change, that base camping where, you know, first portage, first campsite, and people will spend the whole week there and set up the Taj Mahal of tents and saunas and all sorts of crazy stuff.
When I go rambling around in Forest Service land, walking the dog, I come across these, what look like wellheads. They're green about this high. What are they monitoring?
Well, I'm guessing you're living south.
Well, I'm usually going like south, down Highway 1,
Yeah.
and then here they're branching off of that.
So there are monitoring wells with the Twin Metals project and proposal. So there are definitely monitoring wells out there that they've done a long-term study to monitor the water quality, flow, looking at the geology down there.
So it's Forest Service project, U of M project, or is it the mines project?
It's the mine. And so obviously there was a lot of change over the last couple of years on that, having to do with permits. Permits are terminated. There's in the mineral withdrawal process right now. And so we're definitely in a time of change. And so some of those on Forest Service land, you know, you have to get like really specific as to which parcel it's on. There is a plan to remove those and rehabilitate that ground. So, but but there's all sorts of ownerships out there. And so some of it's on private that they own, some of it's on county, some of it's on
Yeah,
state.
I generally see them on these, there's a gate that says,
Mhm.
you can walk this, no trucks, you're okay, but be respectful, and it'll usually have a Forest Service
Mhm.
plaque on it, and so they go all over the place.
Yeah,
And so then you
yeah.
come across these wellheads.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep, that's
The
what that is.
question was about these pipes coming out of the ground. A lot of those were exploratory holes, and they just put that pipe over the hole.
Hmm.
And Minnesota law is that if you're a homeowner, you drill a well, and you abandon it, you have to plug it right away. Somebody approved has to plug it. If you're an exploratory company, a mining company, you can drill an exploratory hole and you put that pipe up and you leave it for 10 years. And the reason I know this is because Pat and I were down on Highway 1, I think it was last summer, and I saw a big rig back in the woods. I thought, what's going on? So I stopped and asked them. They said, we're plugging the hole now. It's been 10 years since they started drilling it. And so I don't know if when they're, after they plug them, whether they remove that pipe or not. But anyhow, a lot of them are original exploratory holes made 10 years ago.
thank you.
Yeah, it's really complicated. Like each one, you kind of have to go into each one and figure out, is this a lease? Is it a prospect? Is it state land? Is it forest? And then how did it get authorized? And some of them, the Bureau of Land Management authorizes them because it's underground mineral activity. And others, the Forest Service authorizes them because it's on the Forest Service land, but not related to the minerals. So it's really a complicated topic.
Speaking of holes in the ground, in the boundary waters, if you have to dig a new toilet pit, how do you dig that?
With a shovel.
Is that how it's done?
Yeah,
Guys,
yeah.
men and women with shovels,
Yep.
and they dig a hole.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to talk to them. Like they do compete. Like, hey, how many did you dig this year? And a couple of them get really into it. So they also get really savvy. So they'll tell some stories about like, oh, okay, I got to dig a new hole. One of the biggest things is like, where were the other holes? Because you don't want to hit those. Occasionally they do. They say the digging's really easy.
How deep do they go?
Well, they're not, like maybe 3.5 feet or so. Yeah, yeah. And then, but I think it's almost more about the scenery, right? I don't know. I spent a lot of time on river trips, and the most important thing is like, what's the view? So, holes in the ground, though, it reminds me of one other thing that's really a hot topic is northern long-ear bat. And so this year, the northern long-ear bat was uplisted from threatened to endangered. And many of you probably know, I've seen it from my previous trips here. When I lived in Wyoming, there was always bats, right? Like every campsite, you'd sit there around the campfire and you just watch the bats. And I noticed last summer in particular, we went on this big long 10-day trip up through Crooked, and on that whole trip we saw 2 bats. And it's just phenomenal. The white nose syndrome has really knocked down the bat population. And so with that change, there's been a lot of work done, what's called the bat conservation strategy. Like how are we going to protect bats? Here, there's a couple things like the underground part. So there's the Sudan mine, but then here there's also the Section 30 mine. And that is a hibernaculum where the bats will, spend the winter and hibernate. But then there's also roosting trees. And so some of these older trees with the bark kind of sloughing off, the bats will actually go in there and they'll roost and have their babies. And so they're really important for the bats during the summer up here. So we have some of those identified, and we try to be careful around them. Like if there was one on the Echo Trail, we'd be talking to the county like, yeah, that one don't cut down. And so just be aware that it's definitely a major change on the wildlife side of things. And then it has some very real impacts on the timber, prescribed fire, all sorts of things. It's something to just maybe tune into.
Is that the predominant or only bat species?
No,
here?
there's like 4 of them. There's a little brown bat, northern long ear. I'm not 100% sure of the other couple, but northern long ear has been the one on the radar, but the little brown bat is of concern too. And they travel, see, that's the thing, is they travel down south and they'll hibernate like in the southern US, so it affects the whole eastern United States. And so the Forest Service has done that bat conservation strategy, looks at thousands of decisions that were made, and they try to figure out, is this going to impact the bats or not? So it's been something we worked on quite a bit over the last almost year. So it's kind of all I think that's on the top of my head, but a lot of great questions in here. How am I doing on the hour and a half though, Jeff? Like, I thought a half hour most max would be pushing it, so. You got lots of good donuts and coffee and goodies, so I don't want to be the only thing standing between you and all that.
Let's talk about climate change of the tree species. As you head north, they're promoting the planting of different tree species up here. Are you aware of that? Where they're saying plant more, what are they, oaks, certain oaks up here now? And
yeah, so the Forest Service, it was super cool. When I first got here, we have the Northern Research Station, which a bunch of scientists based out of all sorts of universities, and they were working on what's called assisted migration. And so it might be something worth Googling and checking out. I'm not 100% sure if that report's been published, but it seems to me that we have. And so what assisted migration is there's a couple different ways to think about it, but what species are here? And as the climate warms, the prediction is that those will kind of move north, and then what will come in behind them. And so it is possible to say harvest white pine seeds or seedlings from, say, southern Minnesota or central Wisconsin, which 50, 100 years from now, the climate here will be that same temperature. So you're planting species of trees that are adapted to that warmer climate already, but it's the same species. It's still white pine or still red pine. And so that's kind of basically where the primary part of what we're doing is like taking species that exist here and planting those species, but maybe from the southern end of their range into this area, so that we're still maintaining that boreal forest. Superior National Forest every year plants about 1 million trees across the forest. And so we have a nursery the nursery in Wisconsin, and every one of our ranger stations has a tree cooler. And this time of year, we start getting our trees, and then as soon as we can get in, stick them in the ground, our whole crew, like my whole office, will go out and plant trees, and then we hire contractors to plant trees. And so thinking about that, what trees are we planting, and are they resilient for a changing climate? I think the oaks and maples are kind of naturally moving up, and what we call it the mesification. So it's getting wetter up here, whereas the pines and conifers like a xerica drier environment. All right. Well, with that, I hear activity happening, so
Thank you.
I'll stick around for a little bit. Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. You took it easy on me.
Yes. Help yourself to more coffee if you would like to,